This is Amária Sweet with HeartMind Expressions, and we've got Alex 2 and Sue again. How are you guys doing today?
Yay.
Doing well.
Awesome.
Enjoying all the winning that's going on in the world. It's a
Hell
beautiful
yeah.
day.
Popcorn
Hell
event.
yeah.
Into the breach once more.
We've had some really cool discussions and a lot of stuff going on. So why don't we go ahead and start from the beginning? Who wants to take over and run with it?
Alex, you want to talk
Paper,
about the
scissors?
Babylonians?
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the Babylonians.
Yes.
Let's start at the very
Yeah.
I'm like a little kid right now when I talk about this stuff. Yeah, so let's talk about the Babylonians and about all the other tribes that have existed in days yonder, or actually days prior. So there was a tribe. I forgot the actual name of the tribe, but it was, I think it was the Canaanites, if I remember correctly. And what they did was they had a deity that a lot of us have probably gotten used to the name. There are actually two names for it. Either it's Moloch or it's Baal. Now, Baal is spelled B-A-A-L. There's a hyphen between the two A's. And this particular deity is known for its desire for sacrifice, most notably child sacrifice. And so what happened was this particular group was actually kicked out of the Fertile Crescent and then eventually moved up to the area known as Khazaria, which is in the Cascadian mountain regions near modern-day Georgia, places like Armenia, in that particular area. And they still follow the same particular belief system as what they did back then. But you had the Russian Tsar, I believe he was a Tsar at the time, or maybe it was a great prince. But the leader of the Russian people said to the people of the Khazaria at the time, either you convert to an Abrahamic religion, or we will conquer you and destroy you for your heresy and your destruction and your horrible ways. And so what happened was they're like, okay, sure, no problem, we'll do that, and they became Jewish. They followed Judaism, which is where a lot of the confusion these days actually comes with who are the true Jewish people. You have the actual Jewish people, and then you have this interloper, this group that kind of came into it having the title of it, but actually not really was that. And so later on, they started doing their migrations. Now, the true Jewish people eventually moved out of the Middle East and into Europe. And you had several different groups of that. One went into Italy and Greece. Another one went into Spain. That one was called the Sephardic Jews. And then you had another group that was primarily from Khazaria, and that was known as the Abkhazia. Was it Abkhaz? Yeah. I'm sorry, Ashkenaz. That's it, Ashkenaz. I said Ashkenazi. And that was primarily in Germany and in Eastern Europe. And so what happened was that they started started mingling with the population, and one particular group that was known for their that particular bloodline would be the Rothschilds. Rothschilds, I believe it's actually how you pronounce it. In the literal translation is red shield. That's why when you hear things, you hear red shield bankers. That's where Rothschilds means, because Roth means red, shields means shields. And they actually, their main region of where they used to be part of is in an area which is centered around the Black Forest of Germany, which is ironic when you think about what's happened recently within the last few years, because the Rothschilds had a lot of property over there, and they have recently vacated it and sold it off. But prior to them really becoming like the prominent figure that they were bankers. They were people who would deal with the money because there was a rule within Christendom that you do not touch money, because money means greed, and you're not to be greedy. And so they used to have people who were not non-Christian to deal with anything that had to do with money, because they didn't want to have their hands on it, because then they'd be considered soiling it to the face of God, amongst other reasons and other cultural reasons. And so what happened eventually was they eventually started going into places like Britain, most notably the Napoleonic Wars, where they actually funded both Napoleon and the British. And what happened was that the Red Shield couriers went to the London Stock Exchange, and they said, Napoleon has won, Britain has lost, sell all your stocks because you're not going to get anything. In which the British did. They sold everything. And when they found out that the Duke of Wellington came back winning the Battle of Waterloo, the Rothschilds bought all the stocks at pennies of the dollar and started to, they basically captured Britain. Which moves us into the United States, where they started doing something very, very similar with the different bankruptcies. Most notably what happened in 1913. But I'll let you guys go ahead from there.
The creature
Well,
from
that's good.
Jekyll
Let's,
Island.
now before we get into that, let's talk about the Titanic and how that plays a role with 1913.
Yeah, sure. So during the night, so you had I think it was the White Star Line was the group, and it was actually, the company was actually bankrolled by Red Shield bankers. And it was called the Titanic, which is ironic when you consider the book that was written several years prior called The Titan, which the book, I forgot what the actual book was called. I think it was called Titan, but The Fate of the Titan, right? And in that book, you had the Titan capsize.
1898.
Yeah.
Was that
1898 is when it was written.
1898. And it talked about how there was going to be a calamity with the Titan running into an iceberg and eventually sunk. Well, we moved to 1913 with the maiden voyage of the Titanic, of White Star. And what happened? Well, that exact thing. In fact, there has been a lot of speculation about what has happened. Was the crew in on it? Was the captain in on it? What happened? And what was so special about this was, first of all, anybody who opposed the Federal Reserve ever being created, everyone who opposed were on there. And there were particularly 3 people, which were all very wealthy bankers, or they were industrialists, or they were tycoons. And they mainly believed that there was no need for a central bank because it would take away wealth from the common man, and it would make it so that nobody would be able to prosper on their own. Instead, they would go into deep debt, indebted to a system that would never be able to be quelled. Well, we had all these other people who were for the central bank. One would be, oh my gosh,
Morgan.
J.P. Morgan Chase.
J.P. Morgan, yeah.
I think John Rockefeller had an invite. Andrew Carnegie, I believe, had an invite to this particular event. And what happened? Oh, look at that. They happened to cancel because they had some other event, or they just weren't able to attend. So they're coming from, I think the trip was from London, or no, not London. I believe it actually was from Edinburgh. It was from Edinburgh. They were going to go over the Arctic Circle, and they were going to land in, I think, New York, more correctly. Well, while they were going through the Arctic Circle, what happened? An iceberg. And we know what happened after that, where the majority of the crew and passengers perished. And everybody who opposed the central bank all died at that moment, ushering in the possibility of the central bank to come in on Christmas while Congress is away.
Yeah, that goes
And
to show you that they're the types to have zero problem getting rid of you, even if that means to get rid of the entire of a group just to get to you.
it's not unheard of for them to use very underhanded tactics, assassinations, scandal, other measures that are not those two. Just the dirtiest of dirty tactics. Anything to just destroy you or not even remove your image, because what happened was, I mean, we don't even really, most people don't even know the names of these people. I think one of them was Isa. I think his first name was Isa, Washington or something like that. But we don't even, most people don't even know their names. Yes.
Benjamin Guggenheim.
Well, and these names aren't even taught in schools.
And John Astor was the wealthiest man in the world at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Strauss was the head of Macy's. So you have extremely wealthy and prominent people being asked. And JP Morgan was actually going to attend as well, but that was the worm on the hook. At the last minute, he backs out because he said he wasn't feeling well. The ship leaves, and they put an inordinately high amount of insurance on the boat, just like 9/11, when the building was renewed insurance-wise right before the attacks. And JP Morgan is then later photographed partying and dancing out in New York City celebrating, even though he was supposedly ill. So this was the first big, well, we won't say the phrase because of YouTube's capturing, but we'll say a
Mass casualty event?
Yeah, Ben and Rob had another name to describe this, but it was a phony, I'll just say a phony flag.
Oh, yeah. Yep. That's a good one.
A bogus banner. That was what they called
Bogus banner.
Yeah,
I like
bogus banner,
that.
it. So that was that. Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Alex. Go ahead.
Yep. I actually, that house, my mind blanked on the names of this people, unlike John Astor. But yeah, one of the few things that we learned about that in particular incident was that Woodrow Wilson actually had one of these, smoky backroom deals that he said that he'd be willing to sign the Federal Reserve Act into law if he would become president. Prior to this, he was the governor of New Jersey. He was I believe he was also the president of Princeton University. So as one New Jersey to another, corruption runs very deep within the state. So I will just leave it at that. There's a lot of nefarious things that have happened, and that is completely unrelated to the topic we're talking about right now. So I'm not going to go into it too much. But Jekyll Island, let's talk about the actual plan, what they actually had, and how a small island off of Georgia really kind of cemented the fate for the next 100 years. And you guys want to take from there?
So
I remember the story. It's been a really long time since I've read the book Creature from Jekyll Island. I was a teenager. It is a very good book for those of you that are wanting to know something. It's also in audio form, and it talks about the creation. I'm trying to remember the date exactly. Like I said, it's been a long time. Basically, all of the bankers that were brought together to make the cartel that created the group, and they also created the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC, which started our income taxes. It also started our birth certificates, our social security cards, basically that mark of the beast number system that they wanted to start getting us into.
Yeah, they allow us not to be our own person.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what happens, one way that they're able to lay claim on us each one of us as a sovereign being, or instead of a United States citizen, you would be a U.S. national. And so as a national or a king, queen, that's kind of like, what is it? You come to America to live the dream. A lot of people say what that is we can all become our own sovereign system, our own bank, whatever you would will it. And our birth certificate is basically like a bond. Is that what you would call it, Alex? I'm trying to remember. I'm in Bloom. Excuse me. Like the details. I understand how it works. It's just explaining it all. And I know Bloom is really good at that. I'm going to let you do it just because I can kind of piece it, but you've got a lot more detail than I've got at this point.
So our birth certificate, there's a certain amount of money attached to that, and then that is sold on a stock market. And so the birth certificate represents what's called a straw man. And this is why when you see your name in like a credit card statement or in an affidavit, like in a legal proceeding or whatnot, it's always capitalized. That's because when it's capitalized, it's representing your straw man, not you as a sovereign being. And that's because we're not using common law, we're using maritime law. And there's a completely different set of code that's going on. Part of Nassara is bringing us back to that kind of natural God's law. And so there's a great documentary called Straw Man, and it kind of goes into depth about this, talking about that. But yeah, that's an important concept here. So, and that's part of the argument for Nassara, that, you know, the money that we have been allotted for each of us with our birth certificate is going to be given back to us. So we'll see. But interesting theory.
It'd be really nice. I think it's an awesome concept. So I'm hoping that really is what's going on. I know that there's opinions on all sides. And at this point, you know, we are in a battle. I'm not going to say the W word, but in a battle that's been going on for a very long time. And it is evil against the light. So
Against
what can
personal
we
sovereignty
do?
and, you know, our
Right?
freedom. You know, we just, I mean, that's unfortunately the illusion that we were given is that we're free. We can free to make our own choices and stuff. And as of recently, it has been showing that we're not really all that free.
Right.
You know, we have been having our freedom chipped away little by little, hoping that nobody would notice. And a lot of us are starting to notice. That's how, you know, our president is getting a lot of people to backing him. That shows you how many people have noticed that there is a problem.
Yeah, and I think it's more apparent now than ever before. You see kind of our liberties being stripped away. You see double standards in terms of the First Amendment. That's a great one to highlight first. So you have, let's say, weed stores open, but you can't go to church.
Yeah.
You can riot, not just peacefully protest like the Constitution explicitly says, but other forms of the First Amendment are not allowed. First Amendment speech is now being heavily, heavily censored on social media platforms. And the argument from the other side is that, well, they're a private company, they can do what they want. And it's not really that simple. You have a very prominent psychologist testifying before Congress saying how in the 2016 election that Google swayed thousands of votes to a significant degree that it could have impacted the election. So these companies, these tech giants, when they get large enough, they're not just a private company anymore. And there's a big push to have them become a public platform, like a public service. So you can still have private companies. So think of the metaphor here of like phone companies, that if you had, I don't know, let's say Pacific Bell or AT&T, that these are private companies, but the service of using a telephone is public. And so you don't have those companies going around and saying, well, you know, you were talking about some sort of topic that we want to have censored. such as election fraud. And so as a result of that, we're going to end this phone call, or we're not going to allow you to make phone calls anymore, right? Like, that's just ridiculous. So this is where Section 230 of a particular bill that was passed in the late 90s comes very prevalent, because back then in 96, 97, when this was passed, that
The Telecommunication Act of 1994, I believe.
was it 94? Okay. So
94.
when that was passed, the internet was new, and they wanted to have this protection put in of a platform versus a publisher being the argument.
96.
And so
96, I'm sorry.
96. Okay. So with that, what that meant is, if you are a platform, then you can't censor. You don't have control over public discourse. You're just providing the, like the word says, a platform or a base to have a discussion.
Right.
And that's different from being a publisher, which means that you can take the reins, you do have control, you can censor, but that also makes you liable for lawsuits. And so what we have seen with social media and just the other tech giants is that they are straddling the line, and they are calling themselves a platform, but they're acting like a publisher. And they're falling under the guise of, well, this is hate speech. That's their out card, their loophole. And so everything that doesn't fit what they want to have in terms of content being spread out there, they just broadly label it as hate speech.
There
And
is
so
a code out there. There is a code out there. I'm sorry to interrupt, Doctor.
No, go ahead.
That I don't remember what the code name is, but there is a code or a thing that talks about that they are allowed to censor certain things. They did have a thing such as pornography and things like that. This code, it did allow these platforms to take care of certain problems, but they've been stretching. That was a thin line, and they managed to find a way to stretch it out into, you know, the waters of the territory of anybody talking about other stuff. And so that's why, if you notice, like on platforms, they would say, well, it's under the guise of, you know, pornographic pictures or nudity or certain words and things like. They have a list of things that they give you. Well, if you're not doing anything on the list, they still don't care. They're going to accuse you of something that's on that list when they censor whatever you put up. So that's, you know, they made this broad, but so they've been abusing that privilege of reason why they are allowed to do some censoring. But the censor was just to protect certain types of groups, such as, you know, to have, you know, things that are inappropriate context. That was the only reason why it was supposed to be there, but they've been abusing that privilege.
There can be some argument too on the preventing of information through a shadow means, if we know what I'm talking about. For instance, some of us have been doing some disclosure things on secret military programs, and we talk about specific areas, and then all of a sudden it gets garbled internet-wise. We can't be heard, or we get kicked off our site. And then we can't comment on Facebook, we can't like or share, yet there's no official ban. It just happens to be, okay, what's going on? Maybe I'll call my internet company and nothing's wrong, or my phone is working just fine. It just happens to be that platform. So it's real, and this is definitely against our sovereign rights.
One thing I wanted to bring up, and have some fun with this if you want to, because this might be very interesting. You could tell if somebody is really for First Amendment style free speech. And all you got to say is hate speech is free speech. That's all you got to say is hate speech is free speech. Why do you got to say that? Well, because hate speech itself is subjective. Not everything is going to not everything that is hateful is actually hateful to everybody else. So, including that as free speech, you know, free speech literally, as it is intended, is that it makes sure that speech is not censored. that the free flow of information is through. And if something is something you don't like, you just let a person know that you don't like that and you believe it is that you are opposed to it. Then the law is not supposed to get into it at all. Free speech is all about public interaction between voluntary parties, not about a law actually going into doing this. And we're seeing this in other places in the world. My favorite example is over in Britain. There was a guy named Count Dankula. That was his tag name. And he got a dog to do the Sieg Heil, okay, the German Nazi salute. Now, here in the United States, that would be like, whoa, that's a big faux pas. You shouldn't be doing that. But you won't have the police knocking down your door and arresting you for doing that. It'd just be like a nice slap on the wrist. Please just don't do that again. No, what they did was they actually went to his house, pulled him out of his house, and arrested him. Because in Britain, they don't have free speech laws. And they also don't have them in places like Canada or Australia or New Zealand. And what we're seeing is that these countries that don't have this, China, but these places like even Western democracies, they don't have the free speech that there is in the United States. And when it comes to these crackdowns, as you're seeing all over the place, they have a lot more leeway to do things because there aren't rights that are codified.
This is why they have to push public opinion in order to change the Constitution. So that's why you're seeing all of this kind of push to ratify the First and Second Amendment. And it's the Hegelian dialectic, right? That's how they were able to some degree, ratify the Fourth Amendment with the Patriot Act, that you have problem, reaction, solution. So you already know what the solution is, but you have to invent a problem in order to get a certain reaction from the people for them to clamor and cry for the solution that you have waiting in the wings.
Yeah, that's why they've also been like chipping our freedom away, such as the whole mask thing. Now they want us to wear it in public. If we just walk up and down the street, the minute we step outside our door, we have to put a mask on. And if you don't do it, they're going to arrest you. And,
fine you.
Fine you, but mainly they want you arrested. And, and even Trump has said, even many have said that is unconstitutional. That's not going to happen here. They don't want that to happen here. But we're slowly seeing it happening in smaller cities, smaller towns, smaller places. It's almost like they've been using it as a testing ground to see how much they can get away with. And that is their method. They will find a little space of giving it a test, stick your toes in the water. And that's the same thing with the whole Ferguson thing. All the Antifa stuff that we're seeing now, Ferguson was the practice test. I know, I'm in St. Louis here. I'm from St. Louis, and I saw this whole thing, and when it played out, it looked weird. It looked absolutely out of place, and it looked completely weird. It just, because of how they took an issue, yes, it's very sad. You don't want anybody to be killed. You don't want anybody to die, but they blew the heck out of proportion, and they're doing the same now. They're taking issues and problems that has happened, and they're blowing it beyond all the means in the world. Burning buildings, rioting, looting. How is that supposed to help somebody that has even died, even in the hands of the police? And it all branched on to, now you have to wear a mask. Now you have to, everything was connected with the election. So everything is just connected to finding a ways to chip away whatever freedom and sovereignty we have, whether it's speech, whether it's doing, whether it's playing, whether it's going to, from, whatever we do in our life, they want to make sure that they can catalog it, calculate it, keep track of it, keep tabs on it. And that's their main goal.
Way too much control.
Also, remember that the way a lot of these mayors and governors are doing things is a breach of the
I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
United States Constitution. Yeah. The way an executive operates is to enforce the law. That's why we have a legislature.
Your signal's breaking up.
Your signal's breaking up.
Well,
You want to go back into face
Okay.
mode?
Yeah, it sounds
Sorry?
good.
You were talking about mayors?
Yes, I was talking about how governors and mayors are violating Article 2 of the United States Constitution by creating law instead of enforcing law.
Yeah.
By the way that they're using their sweeping executive mandates and law orders and using them as law. Now you can't do that. That's not an executive order. An executive order only works for the executive branch. All right, that means any of the departments that are under the executive branch of government. If they involve the police or they have anything like that, first of all, it's enforceable. There's
broken
no
up,
law
Alex.
that is
Alex, you've broken up completely. I think you may have to go in face mode.
and so the
Alex.
arrest or charge or
Alex.
judiciary.
Alex.
Hey, buddy, you might want to turn
Yeah.
off your camera and see if maybe shortening your bandwidth will help you because you're still breaking up, hun.
You may have to start all over.
Yeah, dang it.
Well, we knew something like this was going to happen, I guess.
There we go.
And
Yeah,
hopefully you're getting that message out.
you are.
Consider it, what do they call it, a badge of honor?
Where did I
You
really
were
chop
talking
off?
about Article 2 and how they can only enforce it through the executive branch.
Oh, yes. So, as you know, this is one of the major reasons they got rid of civics within education systems, right? Because they didn't want to talk about how laws are made, how the whole system works. Because if the people know how the system works, then they can tell when something is gone awry. All right. So basic civics 101. The legislature creates the law. The executive branch acts on the law. The judiciary makes sure that law is constitutional. That is their whole job right then and there. If one wants to check the other one, that's called the checks and balance system that we have. And if the judiciary want to say that the law that the legislature has passed and the president has signed is unconstitutional, that is called judicial review. And basically you review the bill, say, no, you can't do this because of X, Y, and Z, and thus it is completely invalidated. You can't do anything with that anymore because it is wrong. And what we're seeing right now is the executive abusing their powers by doing these mandates, by doing all these shutdowns, which are completely unenforceable, by the way. Unfortunately, the populace are so used to the idea of let's just follow the leader. Unfortunately, they basically have what's best, what's in our best interest. Unfortunately, and we have this idea of ignorance is bliss with that. So once we start having these lockdowns the way we have it now, they are no wiser than what could possibly be happening for malicious reasons, which is actually a reason. It kind of goes into a thought where I had where this is part of what they want to do with the Great Reset, actually. But we could touch on that a little bit later, if you wish.
Yeah, I think that'll be important to talk about.
For sure.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think if all the important bits and pieces have been brought together for what we're disclosing to the public to help those that are just learning.
Let me add one more thing, and that is back to like the birth certificates and the straw man and whatnot, that our country has been hijacked, and this goes back a long time. So believe it or not, the country has actually been morphed into one giant company, an incorporation. And this goes back to 1871. And we were originally called these United States for America, not the, or these great United States for America, not the United States of America. And that was changed. And then we got turned into one giant corporation.
And that is one of reasons why we have the capital USA.
Right. That's right.
Even the Constitution, from what I had heard, was rewritten in all capitals. And so the original Constitution was actually written correctly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we've
There
got
was-
the straw man Constitution.
I've heard two different stories. One is the day Trump got into office, and the other story I heard is, I think it was this past 4th of July, the 4th of July from the year before, that it was changed, and that we went back
Oh, cool.
to, and this is again where the stories kind of combine, but so the first story is, when Trump got into office in the beginning, the very next day he ratified the Constitution, he changed it, and so we went back to the old one. And then the other story is, on the 4th of July, Melania actually came out and made reference to a new Constitution. So
I remember that. I was actually at that event.
Cool.
cool.
It was mentioned during, I think, the 4th of July of 2019.
Is it
'Cause
19?
Yeah, I was at that event, and that's where we had all the flyovers that year.
Hmm.
It was and even though the media and other people will say that photo, that oversized photo of all the people over in the reflecting pool of the Lincoln Memorial was a fake, I can attest to you that there were over 1 million people there. I literally had no wiggle room whatsoever. I was against the fence because you had two sections of fence. You had the public area where you could walk in, and all you had to do was go through the checkpoint. They just did there was the low security thing where you had to go down, they packed you down, and then you were able to go through. There was a VIP section that was on the other side of the reflecting pool. That was for members of the press. It was for high members of the executive branch, military veterans, stuff like that. And that was much higher security. You could actually pay to get those tickets if you wanted to go up there, but you had to get that earlier. But it was huge. There were many times where I would literally have to be talking with different security agencies because of that. I was dealing with Capitol Police. I dealt with the National Guard, the United States military. I dealt with the Secret Service. They were all there, which means that there was something highly important that was happening that day. Also, notably, our president is notoriously late, fashionably late when it comes to these meetings. And I believe he was 45 minutes late to speak, if I remember correctly. And what was so interesting about that day was that the whole day was waterlogged. You got there and there was a massive summer squall that just came over it. The moment that the summer squall finished was the time when the president got out of his entourage and onto the stage. It was just probably 10, 20 minutes after that where he actually went on stage.
Interesting concept there about him running late. It reminds me on election night when he was going to give his speech late in the night. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
And originally there were staff that came out in order for him to talk, and it kept being delayed of like, oh, soon, he's going to come out and give a press briefing, etc. And so originally staff started coming out at 11:11 Pacific time. And then a few minutes later, he came out and it was 2:22 a.m. So it'd be 11:22 Pacific, but it was 2:22 Eastern.
I remember that.
Interesting timing.
Yes.
Timing is everything, right?
Yeah,
It
I
really
think
is.
he's absolutely aware of the numerology.
Oh yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to add when it came to the. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, part of it with the numbers and the numerology and whatnot is him trolling, because this Babylonian cult relies so heavily on not just satanic references, but they use numerology, and it's their everything. And
Well,
so
astrology as well. It's so much, even every type of astrology. They're like so superstitious, but there's a lot of truth behind a lot of those modalities. It's the science behind it.
because it's neutral in its power, just like magic is. It's all in how it's used. It's the intent behind it. So you take astrology, you take magic, you take all these sorts of different principles, and it's all in how it's applied. And so that's why the think mirror reference is so important. We see so many different offshoots or layers of how that phrase alone plays out. But you see that kind of here. And so this is what's so fun. Once you understand this, that you can play along with the fun of it, and you can see how bad he trolls them. It's just hysterical. Like another one that's sticking out real briefly is after the last debate that the next day when the press came in to the White House, they changed the internet code phrase that you had to use to log on to the internet. And it was something like Joe Biden built the cages or something. So it forced all
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I got my popcorn out right now, because I'm excited for this.
Yeah.
Can I add to those stories that you were talking about, Dr.
Yeah,
Bloom,
please do. Yeah.
for the Constitution?
I thought it was Obama built those cages, wasn't it?
He did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was Biden was the VP.
Oh,
And
okay.
so it was just the fact that
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I remember seeing that about the change the password. That was that was funny.
Now, was a lot of the stuff that came out on that from Maxwell's testimony, or was a lot of it from his son's laptop? Well, laptops, I should say. Wasn't there 3 of them that were found?
3 hard drives.
Or hard drives. Yeah.
3 hard drives, and a lot of this stuff was actually released by the new federal state of China as well, which is a splinter group from the CCP, and it's right now being supported by Stephen Bannon. Basically, what the new federal state of China is trying to create a like a Western democracy in mainland China, and all of it are people who have either defected or are currently dissenting towards the CCP and their tyrannical rule over there. Some of them have been able to leave mainland China, go to Taiwan. Others are currently in exile and dealing with what's that called? What's the term that they use for if you're in another country and they're protecting you? Asylum. That's it. They have some. One of the doctors who dealt with the China flu that we're dealing with right now. She actually is currently in hiding in New York City.
Is that the whistleblower?
Yes, that is the whistleblower. That is the one whistleblower that we know of at this moment. We do.
Yeah.
There is another gentleman who's also releasing a lot of the information from the servers, and
There
a lot
has
of the
been
information
several, but they've been off. They're disappeared.
Well, I would assume that is
Yeah.
that they did their job, and so there's no need for them to make an appearance at the moment.
Yeah.
But the one thing I wanted to mention about the Constitution was Britain, during the War of 1812, when they burned down the White House, there was supposedly a 13th Amendment that was on the original Constitution before they created this strawman Constitution, and that 13th Constitution had something called the nobility clause, or clauses when it comes titles of nobility. That's what it's called. I'm sorry, titles of nobility. Basically, what happened was if you had some type of title, like for example, Esquire, like if you're on the bar, something like that. If you have an Esquire, you're a count, you're a lady, a lord, king, queen, knight, stuff like that. You're not allowed to hold public office whatsoever, because since you have that title, you at that point owe your life to another foreign entity, such as the British Crown or the Spanish Crown, something like that. So the founding fathers didn't want that to happen, because they just broke away from the British and wanted it so that all people who were running for public office were loyal to the Constitution and to the peoples of this nation.
Mm-hmm. I also heard in there, you would know this better than I would, but I don't know if this was in the old Constitution or it's still acknowledged in the new one, but that technically if you are in Congress, you cannot be a lawyer. Have you heard that before?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that one. That's interesting. Good question.
Yeah, part of that is when you take the bar exam that you are pledging your alliance to the crown.
And ladies and gentlemen, if you didn't know, the BAR is an acronym. It's not just something that just said. BAR stands for British Accreditation Registrar. So how in the world can there be an American bar? That makes no sense at all. An American.
It'd be like the R. R.
Americans should be using common law. What we're doing in the court systems is called maritime admiralty law, which is exactly what you're talking about with the straw man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the flags, even the size of our flag, a 3x5 flag is that straw man flag. And right now we're in
because it has the
battle.
gold fringe around it.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
right.
The gold
Yeah,
fringe,
gold fringe,
and
yeah.
then also the size, because I think the actual size of the flag is supposed to be like 6, I think, by 3 or something like that.
I actually have that. Give me 1 second. I actually have the actual dimensions.
I remember, because I remember there's a specific dimension that it's supposed to be.
Yes,
and a lot of people are not aware of our peacetime flag too. The flag that's usually flown is a wartime flag. The one with the sideways stripes. It's supposed to be up and down stripes for peacetime. It's a different flag.
So here's the funny thing. If you actually see an American flag, the one we know, when we have Old Glory, the red, white, blue flag that we see everywhere, if you're actually hoisting that flag over a house, at that point you are declaring to people through flag code that you are a military facility, not a civilian facility. Because that is a war flag, or a battle flag.
Wow.
It's the title. It's called the Title 10. I think it's called the Title 10 flag, Chapter 10 flag, and that was secured by a man by the name of Russell J. Gould to the United Nations, saying that the United States is the successor nation from the British Crown. So basically, because of the 1999, which is where the bankruptcy of the United States, third bankruptcy that was created through the Great Depression, happened. 1999 was when everything was supposed to be done and over with. We have paid our debts, and we shall be completely sovereign. And that never occurred. In fact, that's where a lot of the issues came with when it came to the fraud of an election that was the 2000 election. If you are old enough to remember, we had Bush v. Gore. And isn't it interesting that 20 years later, we're dealing with a very similar situation right now? And would you also know that people like Justice Kavanaugh, Justice Barrett, Justice Gorsuch were all part of the panel that was dealing with the Bush v. Gore decision? I think they were all dealing with some other lower tier job, but I believe they were dealing with some of the lawyers that were at that time.
In Florida, yeah.
They're dealing with the Chad situation, I believe.
Yep.
So it's interesting how a lot of those justices have been spread out now on specific states that have been having issues.
That is such 5D chess right there.
Oh my God, I love it.
I know they're definitely being a stick in the mud to the not so niceies.
But that's where
coming.
some people are suggesting that's where the term Kraken comes by if you start using the names properly.
Right.
Kavanaugh, I think one was Alito was in there. One I found was interesting was when you used the letter E, you had Elena. If you don't know who Elena is, that's actually Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan. And I believe she's dealing with the Ninth Circuit, which is in the West Coast.
Oh, interesting.
But Alito's doing Pennsylvania, doing the area that deals with Philadelphia. I think Clarence Thomas, I believe Justice Thomas is dealing with Georgia, I remember correctly.
I think it was Georgia is what they were saying.
And I think Justice Barrett and Kavanaugh were Michigan and Wisconsin, respectively. Or it was one of them was doing one or the other. I can't remember on top of my head which was which. but I believe they were both dealing with one of those two respective states, which I actually find that to be beautiful chessmanship right there. And surprisingly enough is that this actually was approved by the Chief Justice of all people.
Oh, that's about like the why they're collecting all these affidavits and stuff. That's the shovel right there that's digging the hole.
Right.
They're making it very, very deep, and they're going to kick some people in it once it's big enough, you know.
It's
So.
it's like the biggest Wile E. Coyote trap you'll ever see in the world, but it actually works.
Yeah.
Because all you got to do is have people walk over a certain path, and then boom, it just grabs more than you could possibly imagine. And that's where it goes. Like, nothing is going to stop this because the evidence is there. You have to let the shoplifter leave the building in order for them to be classified as a shoplifter. And if a lot of these people were pardoned by by Renegade 44 when he left the White House, that would mean that the previous charges they had on them would not be able to apply because that was a presidential pardon, which means that they have to re-incriminate themselves. And, well, what is the best way to have them re-incriminate themselves than through a massive voting fraud situation, amongst other situations?
Yeah, oh my God.
And you can see where a lot of the who are supporting these so-called bad guys, as to put it, it's because even what's her name, Press Secretary Kayla? You never say her name, but Trump's press secretary. I'm so McGinney.
Oh, Kayleigh McEnany?
Yeah, McGinney. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I have some trouble saying her name. Yeah, when she was talking about the voter fraud, the news channels just kind of, even Fox News just zipped that story out and said, you know, I can't listen to her lying. I can't listen to her bull stuff. You know, if she says anything that's worthwhile, we'll put her back on. But otherwise, I'm just gonna, you know. And he just literally just zoomed her out, you know, and not let us hear. And then that right there is a walk on our freedom, a chance to hear. We should be allowed to be able to hear and decide for ourselves whether it's worth listening to or not. But they're not giving us that anymore.
That's right. And you have Tucker Carlson the other night.
I was wondering we were going to get to this. Okay. let's talk about this because, oh my gosh, we can only
So
go
I
ahead,
want
I'm
to go
sorry.
back really quick to what we were talking before we jumped to Tucker.
Yeah, the flag measurements.
Oh,
well,
right.
yeah, that too. But one of the attorneys that's working with Trump on the election fraud, her name is Leah Dundas, I think. And anyway, she came forward and said point blank that she is in contact with the military. And she said, number one, there will be thousands of arrests across the country. And number two, the military will be deployed across the country as well. So there's a confirmation.
It's not surprising with the amount of criminal charges that are being
Said not
brought
hundreds,
forth.
thousands.
The indictments is
thousands.
all over the United States, and you can look at the indictment list.
209,000.
Yeah.
Wow, that many now. I was wondering what the count was up to.
Now,
So we can put the indictment list down at the bottom, you know, where they can find it if anybody wants to see the list. Kind of, I don't know how current and updated it is, but I know there's a website you can go and see the list of indictments and where and how many in your state, you know, because we had well over 400 sealed indictments just in St. Louis or Missouri alone. So, I mean, that's considered small compared to a lot of other places where they have thousands of sealed indictments, and each sealed indictment doesn't mean that there's one person on it. There could be hundreds of people on a specific one.
And one of yeah, go ahead.
So I found the flag, by the way. There's the actual measurements. It's supposed to be 1.9 feet in width and then 1 foot in height and hoist. And it is called the official flag of the Unity Hyphen States of the America. And another thing you have to notice when it comes to it is what is on top of the flag on it, because it depends on if it's a ball, it's an eagle, or a spear tip, because those are all completely different things and they mean something.
Wow.
Do you know what they
Thank
mean
you.
offhand, or what the differences are?
Yeah. Ball represents neutrality, that it doesn't have any personal, it doesn't mean anything whatsoever. It's just a topper for the flag. A spear, if there is a spear on the flag, that means it is it is a flag used by some type of war force or military force. So it's like, for instance, there are times where I go to my local VFW, and you go into the area where they have the flags. Those flags will have spears because that is an area where people who are of military service have gone to. And the other one is the eagle. Now, the eagle is usually used for civilian structures or other places of government. So those are your normal three. One's for government, one's for just basic use, and the other one is for military use.
Interesting.
Wow. I know that.
And if you see a fringe on a flag, that means the flag has been captured. That's where the whole game comes from, capture the flag. That means the flag has been captured, and it is considered a corruption of the flag. If a flag were to have the yellow fringes on it, it means that the flag is that it cannot be recognized as that nation's national flag, because that is not what the flag has been described to be.
And we've been
Our
seeing
flag is
the
supposed to be
yellow
red,
fringe
white, and blue.
around it lately.
Right. There's a lot of them like that. I think almost all of them now, aren't they? In the Capitol buildings and military, or what's the other ones? All the postal courthouses that I've seen. I think
We've
I've
been
seen
seeing
all of them.
especially the ones that are behind, the president.
Right.
When he
Well,
talks
here's
and
the
does his
thing.
pressers.
Well, there's a second part to that. It can either be used as a form of capture, or it can be a form of consolidation. It depends on how it's being used. For example, if the president uses his executive powers, in this case, we're dealing with a national emergency right now, he can coordinate forces and the flinches can go yellow. And what that means is that the president is using his emergency powers. If we're not in wartime, or we're using peace, and those things are not in place, then you won't see the fringes as often.
Interesting.
So, there's a lot of flag code. If you guys are ever curious
Right.
about looking at it, there's a whole nother world of how to talk about things. By the way, I recommend everybody, if you're interested, to look at the flag code symbol for the which is solid yellow. I'm not going to say what it is, but I guess you guys may wonder what that is. A solid yellow flag is something that all of us have become very intimately connected to. So I recommend that is your Easter egg hunt for today.
Yeah, homework, huh?
I love it. Love it.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
But can we talk about Tucker Carlson? Because, I mean, that was like the big highlight this week.
Yeah.
Be
So
careful who you follow.
Careful what now?
Careful who you follow.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been doing some digging on this morning. So let's start with kind of the what's out in the open. So the backstory is the other night Tucker went on and started running Sydney underneath the bus. Sidney Powell, who's one of Trump's main attorneys, federal prosecutor, worked on the case with General Flynn. That is a red pill in and of itself for those interested that want to have, if you're wanting to have a conversation with someone about how our rights are being infringed, look up the General Flynn case right now and what the judge is doing, or more specifically not doing.
Oh, jeez.
There's nothing more in your face right now, I think, in the country from a judicial point of view than what he's willing to do in terms of his duty.
One quick note. Remember I was talking about Article 2?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what Judge Sullivan has been doing is a violation of Article 3.
Mm-hmm.
And That's it. That's all I'm going to say. Guys, that's your second Easter egg hunt right there.
Yeah. It's a good one. And there's a lot to that case, just with like the amicus brief and the ideal timing of how kind of that all came into existence. So a week before he enacted this amicus brief with the ruling, the Supreme Court came out saying that it was unconstitutional in certain contexts to have an amicus brief. And the very next week, he violated that ruling in his own court proceeding.
That ruling was called Flocker.
How do you spell that?
I believe it's Flockeer.
Okay.
And it's ironic that we're mentioning about that Supreme Court case, because when they brought it to the appellate courts, the judge that dealt with Flocker was on that appellate panel, and they did not recuse themselves because even though they dealt with that particular judgment.
Well, you could say that Sullivan is now pulling the mother of all Fockers.
Yep.
So
Fucker.
Motherfucker.
we've got that sort of situation. So let's jump to Tucker. So he said, he goes, okay, well, I asked Sidney Powell to come on the show and share basically all of her conspiracy theories about what's going on with this election fraud, and she refused to do so. And so I don't know what to say, but if she's refusing to come on, I was willing to give her an hour. I was willing to give her a full week of my show to come on and talk about this. Well, this is what's so frustrating because, first of all, let me say this. If you have not watched the press briefing with Giuliani and Sidney Powell, that is your required homework for this week. This is the single most important press briefing of our generation, and one of the single most important ones in the history of the entire country, period. So it's about an hour and a half long, but it's absolutely crucial that we all be informed and watch that. And what's so insidious about this is Jenna, one of the lead lawyers that came on and discussed things, she said, I already know how the media is going to spin our presser and not report accurately. And sure enough, what they do, they were mocking the fact that Rudy was sweating. And that's all they covered. It's such a joke. And the poor public, I understand the NPC mindset to a large degree because they're brainwashed in a certain frequency of thought that they've been trained, as the director of the CIA was wanting to do in his famous quote from the late 80s, that we will fully encapture the public when we are able to convince them that they don't need to do their own homework and that they can just watch mainstream media. So
And
they're not
especially
being,
when he was showing the affidavit, and he said, look,
exactly.
I can't tell you the names of the people on there because they could be harassed, they could be bothered,
Right.
they could lose their jobs, and the press was heckling the whole time about it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so basically, so Tucker was laying a trap essentially to Sidney to say, hey, come on and talk about all the goods that you're going to be sharing in court. And Sidney, of course, was not going to fall for that stupid trap. And because, why would you present your evidence to the media so they can scour over it and look for ways to spin it or mock it before you're able to do that in a court of law? It's just no good lawyer would do that, obviously. So she came on, Maria's show, Fox Business, that next morning. I don't remember Maria's last name. And
Maria Bartiromo.
There you go. She's a good one to follow on Twitter. And she actually reposted a meme of Pepe as the Kraken, which was awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah, big time. So anyway, so she went on, she had a phone call with Sidney, and Sidney was saying, this is absolutely ridiculous. Tucker's and the producer reached out to me. They were extremely rude. And I told them under no conditions will I come on your show if you're going to continue to be rude toward me in terms of moving forward with things. So for me, it just shows the level of desperation. So that's kind of the backstory of what happened the other day. Now, it's interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go finish your thought. I'm sorry.
Okay, so it's interesting that a 1-year delta from when Tucker did all these shenanigans was our favorite military insider who discussed this last year to the day about how there will be people that will be turncoats and turn on POTUS and those who you think you can still trust. So obviously this is known in advance. Now, one more piece that I'll say, and that is that I did some digging this morning and there was a Washington Times article that was referencing Comet PP, that's all I'm going to say, and that Tucker was considered to be a VIP in the restaurant. So, and there was supposedly an email that he sent to Hunter Biden talking, I don't remember the content of it, but it was basically saying it was good to see you, like they were acquaintances, if not friends. So,
one thing, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
The one thing I wanted to mention when it came to Tucker Carlson and Sidney Powell was because of, and I wanted to reassure people when I say this, I know a lot of people are talking about, oh, we want to arrest. Where are the arrests? Where happened to this? What are we going to do with that? Well, remember how we have to have our airtight cases when it comes to this. And we have to make sure that there are no technicalities. What Tucker Carlson was trying to do was have Sidney Powell disclose her sources and methods. Mm-hmm. What would happen in that case would that all the evidence that they had compiled would become inadmissible in court. Right. They would not be able to use it whatsoever. So everything that these people have been gathering for who knows how long would never be able to be used in court. And these people who may have been charged with these things could leave on a technicality because these sources and methods were actually released prior to it being seen by the court. And then after that, then it can be divulged after the court case is finished because then it is no longer needed. Yeah.
That's why when it's worth kind of watching that interview that she did by phone with Maria, because she said, because I can't divulge sources and methods because I need to do that in court first. There's a legal proceeding in terms of order, right, of how you do things, like Alex is saying, that she was willing to have a statistician come on and talk about the numbers in more depth, as well as share an affidavit. And so, Tucker was basically just saying, unless you come on and you give us all the goods that we know will blow your case, then it won't be good enough. So
here's the program.
The public, here's the problem though with all of this. The way that Tucker was phrasing things, the public won't understand what it means, and it will just further confirm this bias that it's all conspiracy.
Well, one of the programmings that we've actually had throughout the years was that the bad guys did justice a little bit differently, the justice loosely. And so the cases would run very quickly. Only certain cases, like if you were the good guy and you were actually accused wrongly, then your case is going to be slow as heck. It could be years, whatever. You could be sitting in jail for years. You could be they put you on death row, could be sitting for years, whatever. They'll take years. But if you just, it's just that we were programmed that if we were actually programmed to see justice happen very quickly, and it makes us very impatient. And a lot of the programming, we're used to seeing cases happen very quickly and a decision happen very quickly. Then it happens on the news very quickly of what the story is about. A lot of times we see certain types of cases only take a few months versus some cases take a few years. And we're just so used to that. Another thing is that people don't realize that a lot of the things that the bad guys had tried to program into us is impatience, faster internet. What is Amazon doing? You know, why is our packages coming within a day? You know, if not 48 hours. The mail carriers can't even do that, you know, unless
That
you pay a lot of
instant
money.
gratification.
Yeah. So they're programming this into us. The hurry, quick, zero patience. And so that is also right there getting people, it helps them to say, oh, well, since we're not getting instant results, this must be fake. And don't realize that the wheels of justice true, getting the cases in order, getting all the evidence, getting all the facts, getting everything together really takes time. So you can tell when something is done correctly, it's because it takes time to get it put together.
It takes, so I'll add to that too. So first of all, a true case, you'll not have leaks. You'll not have any information come out until that trial actually comes to when either it comes to trial or the judge dismisses it without a trial, depending on if it is worthy of going to trial. And that's the only time you'll hear about it. Maybe you'll hear one of the lawyers talking about they'll kind of talk about it in an abridged way where it doesn't actually affect the case. They'll talk about that my client is innocent because these things happened, and I'm going to prove this in court because of X, Y, and Z. Another thing about this is if you want to see a true criminal prosecution cases, and we're all waiting for what happens with John Durham and his report, all his investigations.
Mm-hmm.
These usually take
indictments.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
These normally take anywhere from 3 to 4 years in order to get done. Now, imagine the scale that we're talking about. I would more hedge on the 4 versus the 3 just because of the scale that we're dealing with. And how long has John Durham been working with the Justice Department on this? About 3.5 years. So this has been, and he was under AG Sessions. So it's coming. We're in that threshold now. So it's perfectly aligned in how singularities work.
Mm-hmm.
We are having arrests and stuff happening. It's just a lot of little fishes are going. And if you look at certain newspaper articles, you will see trafficking rings going down. You'll see children being rescued. There are things happening. It's just that a lot of little fishes that are, being taken down, and that's how they're going to do it. They're going to take out the little fishes and then it'll work their way up. So we will see, big arrests. We will see big names that are familiar. It's just going to take a bit of time.
Yep,
So
because there's an order and structure to all of this, there are some medium fish that have been arrested. So, for example, Biden's campaign manager was arrested, and in Georgia.
George Nader.
Well, it was his campaign manager, I think, for a particular.
I thought his last name was Dallas or something.
Yeah, yes. It was Dallas, right, right. So, so part of the order is that when you start with the smaller fishes, they are more likely to sing and to rat out the ones above them. And so there's a pyramidal structure with this. That's why they're going after federal workers right now, like postal workers and whatnot. But for those that are following the flight trackers, the other day there was a DOJ plane that landed in Toronto and was there for 3 days, and then just now landed again in DC. Well, what's in Toronto? The headquarters for Dominion. So that becomes relevant because you have to go back to 2018 to Trump's executive order, where he talks about foreign influence with elections. And the Dominion company, Dominion is the voting program that was used in a number of swing states. So Dominion is not based here in the States. It's based in Canada and Venezuela. And the servers for Dominion are not even placed in this country either, which if the average person understood what that means, their head would spin. They'd get extremely angry, as they should. Like the phrase goes, if you're not angry, then you're not paying attention.
Right.
That the servers that were processing everything were in Spain, in Barcelona, as well as in Germany, in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
And this
Germany.
was why the Department of Defense, the secretary, was switched out recently to a former Green Beret, because now you have a good guy, a white hat in there, that then greenlit our forces, not the CIA, our forces to go into Frankfurt in order to capture those servers. And when they came back, they processed the raw data, which if needed will eventually be admissible in court. And that raw data showed that Trump has, 403 or 413 electoral votes.
Yeah.
And he won like basically 80% of the state of the raw vote.
Yeah. So that was already a red wave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Trump did win. The red wave did happen. And that's what was so important. And this is a really important point, because if it wasn't for us, if it wasn't for the awakened ones and the ones who moved past the media smokescreen and were able to get out there and actually not just wake people up the past 4 years, but vote the way that we did in the numbers that we did, then all of what you're seeing would not be able to come to the fold.
Yeah.
Because unless he won truly in a landslide, you couldn't make a strong argument from a legal perspective of how bad the fraud was. So we really were the keystone on some level in order for the next step in this process to unlock.
I would even argue that places like Blue, New Jersey,
You're breaking up.
You're breaking up.
I believe if it went
Spielman, you're still breaking up, hun.
We cannot hear you at all.
red
Nope.
Mm.
Uh-oh.
this year.
Said something that somebody didn't like.
Yeah.
While he's working out the bug, I just wanted to quickly add that if you noticed on election night, the states were turning their color, especially blue, too quickly. And if you noticed, it was all red all the way up until you got to the West Coast. And I think that was basically the bad guys going, oh, heck, we need to do something about it. Then you noticed it started going blue, 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 blue after that. And I also noticed that what I thought was weird is that California just closed their votes, and literally almost seconds later, it turned blue. How can you do that? You haven't started counting. And that right there told me, okay, this is ridiculous. There's absolutely no way you can pick a color. You're not supposed to pick a color unless you know what's going on.
Yeah.
So they were just literally just popping the colors on the states. That's all they were doing. You know.
Literally, I was
you guys
watching.
Can hear me now, right?
Yeah, we were all watching in real time, and it was ridiculous.
And CNN Live said that literally, Wolf comes on and he goes, okay, and the polls are about to close on Pacific Standard Time, at 8 o'clock. And literally within 5 seconds, 10 seconds, he goes, and they're blue. And they all turn blue. And isn't it interesting that all the blue states have their votes in right away, but it's the red states that are taking time. And here's this on top of it. Isn't it interesting that 4 of the swing states had to stop counting in the middle of the night in order to take a rest, and then the next day there was an excuse in terms of why they couldn't continue? And the answer is because there were so many, the true answer, that there were so many votes that came in that it messed with the algorithm, the software formula that was used needed with Dominion to flip the vote, that it crashed it. And so it went beyond even their guesstimate level of how many people were going to vote, because they have like a 3% waffle that they've used in all these countries like Argentina and Venezuela. And so what they did is they just stopped counting the Dominion votes, and they went to plan B, which was having all of these paper ballots that then they introduced. And if you go to Trump's Twitter page, he posts the statistical graphs, and it's hysterical when you can take the emotion out of it, because it's like, this is so stupid that at 4 a.m. You have 169,000 votes, 100% of them for Biden come in and
Yeah.
being voted magically all within that
Especially,
time period.
yeah,
I mean,
especially
come
if the trucks are coming in or whatever,
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
baskets of
Exactly.
all these votes and everything that they came in the middle of the night. Yeah, it's coming in over
This is what they're so
that's not
scared of.
suspicious. That's not suspicious. No, votes coming in the middle of the night. Yeah.
It's the
Exactly.
Easter
Yeah.
Bunny.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
It's Santa Claus.
well, the deads come out at night, right?
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's
they
when
come
the
out to
deads
vote. That's
voted,
crap.
right? That's when the deads voted.
All the zombies. That's when they come out. There's a.
Yeah, you guys can hear me now, right?
Yes, we can
Now
hear you
we-
now.
Yeah. Okay. We can hear you.
Then can I try this one more time? What I was going to say?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
go for it.
Yeah.
I said New Jersey most likely went red.
Yeah.
And I was
No,
looking
California went red.
I looked into information that is supported by the Department of Elections of New Jersey through the Secretary of the State office. And New Jersey has 21 counties. I know for all you West Coast places, 21 may be just a small region of the state, but we only have 21 regions, and 18 of those 21 regions, both the ballots and the optical scanners use Dominion. The only 3 counties in New Jersey that don't use Dominion would be the counties of Warren, Union, and Sussex.
Wow.
Everybody else uses it. And my county of Middlesex uses Dominion, and we're seeing funny business with it right now.
And Philadelphia was wanting to use Dominion, and after Trump put his executive order in, Philadelphia was denied the request because of the executive order, because it would mean foreign interference because the company is not from the U.S.
I love how
I believe-
smart Trump is.
Right?
He
He's
goes
always
way
10 steps ahead.
He
And
is so
there's
cool.
something else. This was also one of the main reasons why Space Force was created, because with the QFS and having like the GPS marker in like the chip in all of the ballots, that Space Force was tracking all of where the ballots were going in real time.
Yeah, so it didn't matter if they were stuffed in a river or whatever or not, you know, they would all be found and figured out where they actually went.
And that could be a potential trump card if it's needed. See,
Yeah.
he's
I
always
remember.
plan D, E, and F, right? So if the worst case scenario with the Supreme Court or with the state ruling or whatever, then he can use this as an additional layer of proof.
And think about it. I mean, think about it. How many people were at the Biden rallies versus the Trump rally? And you're telling me that Biden has more votes than any president in history. How does that make sense? I have not seen him fill an entire gymnasium yet.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you can when you these big circles that he puts. There's social distancing that's more than 6 feet. And I mean, and you've seen Trump's
the night
rallies.
before the election, when he came out to rally, first of all, he said he wasn't going to. He was going to stay in his basement the last week, but he came out the last
Probably
night.
because the basement was getting a little too stuffy. You know how it is.
Yeah, exactly. So he comes out, he rallies, okay? And there, if you go back and watch it, if you look, there are Jeeps everywhere.
I was just about to say that.
There's some racket going on with Jeeps, because then after he won, he went to Nevada, I think it was, and he had a parade, and all the cars, there were 6 cars, and all of them were Jeeps. So I think there's something going on with Jeeps. But anyway, if you go back and you watch the video, there is no one inside of these Jeeps, and they're all brand new Jeeps within the past year or two. So they're rentals that the Dems are renting, I think, and they're all red, white, and blue, which is interesting, and they're all brand new. It just, none of it makes sense. And the cover story is, well, he didn't have as many people because of COVID. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's total BS. There's no rational.
Yeah, that's not.
When you
that's
have Trump
completely
literally
perfectly normal.
Convention centers. Did you know that every single rally that he had, that he broke records except for 2, and those 2 that he didn't break records were only because officials and Democrats were not allowing more people to come with road closures and whatnot, allowing them to come in time for the rally.
Because heaven
That
forbid
happened-
somebody get
that
that flu without a mask.
That actually
Yeah.
happened prior to the lockdown in New Jersey, because the president had a rally in February of this year, and it was in Wildwood. Now, what happened was that conveniently we had road closures and constructions on the main roads in order to get to the Wildwood Convention Center. Convenient. It was just, it wasn't even, we wasn't even
Yeah,
mentioned
they
the day prior.
scheduled it. I think they scheduled it within 24 hours of when that road, or
Yes,
48
exactly.
hours or something
And
like
so-
that. I mean, really? Yeah.
I mean, normally that stuff is done months in advance. So if you don't think that we have some funny business in some states of ours, then there it is.
Yeah, and I mean, just, you got to look at this thing. There are no coincidences. There really, there are no coincidences. There's all these convenient roadblocks or convenient this and I mean, just everything is just happening. It's just like Alex said about the Jeeps. Really, red, white, and blue Jeeps, new.
Yeah.
I mean,
This
stuff
this
is
is
not
where-
looking normal, and when stuff is not looking normal, right there, that should be something that you should see as a kind of a red flag, red light, or something that said there's something wrong with the picture. And
There's
you
a
gotta
theory. Yeah, go ahead. Finish your thought.
no, that's it. Go for it.
There's a theory floating around that, like, our, how did you say it? Our patriotic informer, Alex?
Yeah.
Is that what, was that your phrase? I think so.
Yeah.
I think that was either
think so.
that patriotic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they were. You see.
Anyway, that there's a theory floating around. Charlie Ward is a big proponent of this, and others, that all of these demon rats were captured and either already gone through their tribunal or waiting and have been executed, etc. And that what you're seeing are either doubles or clones, and that they're just kind of playing it out, or that they've already been arrested and waiting trial, and they are having to, as part of their plea deal, stick to some sort of script. And whether or not that's true, I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever know, maybe. But the more some of this stuff comes out, the more, to me, at least, there's some credibility to this, because the stupidity level and the things that they say, and just how obvious it's becoming. I mean, you have like Biden literally saying on air that we have committed the largest degree of voter fraud in history, you know? And
So here's the deal. We did it.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
it's-
especially when he bragged about his quid pro quo. You know.
yeah, right, exactly.
I mean, you bragged about that, and that's not even enough to wake you up. I
But the
mean,
fact
yeah.
that for 2.5 years, you saw the left kind of crying like babies, saying there was election interference, there was election fraud, that this isn't a legitimate president, etc. And now, as soon as the roles are reversed and you have a Democrat in office, then we're not even allowed to question it, and that Trump needs to be out of office before his supposed due deadline. And it's the hypocrisy is just, it literally takes your breath away. It's like a gut punch, because it's like, wow, really? And I think that in some ways, like, this almost might be done indirectly, of ratcheting it to such an extreme level that it will force people to like burst a bubble and be like, okay, well, wait a minute, this is just too much. I can't get behind this anymore. And that's how you have to wake them up. Again, I don't know, but it's just so interesting to see the depth of depravity that's going on. And there was one other point I was going to make, and I can't remember what it is, but maybe it'll come back to me.
Well, there are pictures even going around that Chelsea Clinton's got an ankle bracelet on, you know, the monitor, a house arrest and stuff. And I don't know, it makes you wonder how many others actually are still walking around freely, but they just have to wear one of those suckers on their ankles and, you know, have to live a certain mapped life, if you will, for the moment.
The president of Huawei had one the other day, I saw.
Mm-hmm.
So
Amazing things coming to light. I'm really excited. That's why I keep pulling out the popcorn. Damn it, because this is good shit right here.
Well,
Oh God.
Talking about truth in plain sight, I think
Yes.
probably one of the biggest things that we're looking at is how going back to what we were talking about in the beginning with the Federal Reserve and the central bank and stuff like that, and how that was done so clandestinely. They didn't know, no one knew about it until it was already there. And now we have their next big thing, which is the Great Reset.
Right.
And you have the World Economic Forum talking about this stuff. They had a video on YouTube, which then they had to take down because there were so many downvotes on it. And normally in this case, you would not, they would never talk about it. They don't need to talk about it. And you have places like these lockdowns where they're trying, these governors like New York, New Jersey, Michigan, California, they're trying to force the reset in those respective states by overstretching their powers, doing very similar things to what other countries are trying to do.
Yep.
And I would say that is probably textbook example of showing your hand when you don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But there's so much hubris, and this is why the beauty of
Yeah.
the Trump trap with this, because there was a video I saw that was tweeted the other night where Biden and others are dancing and celebrating and singing and all this sort of, and none of them are wearing masks, and they're all hugging each other. So, and Gavin Newsom went to that party, right, the other night and wasn't wearing a mask. Jay Inslee, the governor of Washington, just went to Hawaii, even though he's basically having the whole state be on lockdown and no one can, leave.
Well, didn't you know that just like at nighttime, if you don't get an invitation to those things, Corona just doesn't show up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I guess
it's very, very smart virus, especially
Must be the cure.
Must be the
Don't
cure.
send an
riot
invitation
with thousands of people, and you're not going to get it either.
Yeah, and you sit close together at a table, and he lied, and he said that they were outside. No, they were indoors at a restaurant, a nice restaurant, sitting close together.
Right.
Looks like everything's fine. And I mean, really, if the virus is really, really bad, just take a look at this. If the virus was so bad, so awful, yes, people do die, unfortunately. People can get sick, unfortunately. But it's like the flu. People do die. People do get sick. Nobody wore a mask. And any of the viruses that we had previous years, the different types of viruses and illnesses that came out, and we all just worked it through because we had something called herd immunity. But if you look at the rallies, if the virus was so bad, as they say it is, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions, have gone to these rallies, we're looking at least only 1/4 of the United States left alive.
How come all those people in those rallies aren't getting totally sick and dead?
Why aren't the homeless being decimated?
Exactly. So you got to look at some of the things that are not making sense, and saying, well, look.
Well, and then virology too. Think about how you dress up as a virologist. You're literally sealed in a suit that has oxygen being filtered to you. My dad just retired as an orthopedic surgeon. So for 30 years plus, he was in, they suit up. You've got different layers you have to put a couple masks on. The only thing it does is it's keeping your spit from being on the patient.
Right.
I mean, if you can't block a fart with a quilt, I'm sorry, but you're not going to block a virus with a paper or shitty mask.
Yeah. Or even a cloth one. I mean, So, you just got to put these things together.
There's a big study that just came out this past week saying that masks don't do anything. And JAMA, and there was another top tier publication that refused to publish the data and had to kind of wiggle the wording on a couple of the different conclusions in order to get the data published.
Which is typical. If anybody that's listening is familiar with Dr. John Bergman in California, he's amazing. He does the research. He reads every single one of those journals every weekend. And he has shown, and if you go on, he's got hundreds of videos. He's actually showing where the CDC is using live active placebos. That's doctoring the results. They're using the way that their terminology that they're using, they're twisting things around. They've showed that there's specific problems with children, which we're knowing it starts with an A or AS. People can, whatever. It talks about how it causes problems with your neuroreceptors and your immune system. So look up Dr. Bergman, any of you that are listening, because he has got such a plethora of knowledge. This man has, it's got to be in the 90% with his patients, coming from serious illnesses and disease to beautiful health, because the body is made, as he says, to restore and regenerate itself. So we're being lied to somewhere, as this guy is showing proof.
Well, yes, and our immune system, they keep getting us to forget that we have an immune system. Then the herd of immunity thing is what makes the virus weaker. What that means is the first person that gets it might get it bad, but as time goes on and it goes to person, each person is not going to get it as bad as the first person that got it. So it's just that, it's not as bad as you think it. It's horrible. And a lot of people say, well, yes, but masks could help a little bit, help some. And I said, think about how you're wording that, though. If you have one tiny, even a smidge of a virus that goes through, it's bad. If it's so bad, then it would affect us. We
need to be having gas masks then.
Yeah,
I think
all working with these full suits there, and it's the same thing with that. And I'm going to go off topic a little bit, but if you guys have seen, you can look it up. It's all over the web. You can look it up of the gear that they have to wear to spray all the chemicals on our food. The farmers, they have to wear these insane suits to spray on our food, and yet they tell us it's safe to eat.
Right.
Yeah.
You got to look at stuff and find out why this is not making sense. You got to break that program. Absolutely. Got to ask questions. You got to go, how is this making any sense? The first thing you got to ask yourself all the time is, how is this making any sense? That should be a meme everywhere.
Why are we shutting down the entire country for a virus where people live 99.991% of the time? Like, why is that? If you're under the age of 70 and don't have comorbidities, if you do get the virus and you have comorbidities, your risk of death goes up to, like, what is it? The survival rate is 96% or something like that. But the other real piece here is only 6% of people die from true COVID.
Yeah,
I
noticed the CDC changed it. The CDC changed it. First, it was like, what was it, 300,000 something plus that died of COVID. Then they backtracked it, went to about 9,000 actually died of COVID. We're roughly should be at 10 by now, I guess. And now I noticed, I went back to the CDC website and they changed it again, back up into the 100,000s again.
And here's the other real piece too. When you have cases, cases is different than hospitalizations or death. And so when the cases go up, if we're keeping that in context, that is a good thing, because it's watering down the number of the death count and the hospitalization count. So that means that even more people are surviving this virus. Yeah. And we also have to acknowledge this PCR test that's being used is, ask ourselves the question, are they giving us false positives?
Well, and why in the hell are they going so far up into the nose? I mean, I was a pre-med major, and I'm sorry, all you need is cells. Good God, just scrape the mouth, get a little bit of snot. Good jeez.
Why is it that the founder of this PCR test said in August of last year, when it was starting to the virus is starting to take root in China, that this test is not to be used for COVID? That was not how it was intended. And why is it that he died soon afterwards?
Right.
And why is it that when you really look at the threshold of what's being assessed here, read about the test. Just do your own freaking homework. It's not testing for COVID. It's testing for coronavirus. And those aren't the same thing. You've got little particles of viruses that are spindling around, and this test kind of picks this up. But they could also be from a flu or cold or other things kind of that we have dealt with that are classified as coronavirus that then leads to a false positive. That's why you have so many people that are asymptomatic that they're like, oh, well, I just got tested and apparently I have COVID. Isn't that interesting that I have no symptoms whatsoever? And then you do the research on like how many people that are asymptomatic that actually spread the disease. I've read the journal articles and it's laughable because it's not spreadable. But once again, here we are back to the media's two tactics, which is either spin the information that they're getting if it doesn't fit the narrative that they're wanting to portray in the 6 corporations that own 90% of our media and are, as we talked about on the last show, are able legally now to use propaganda and lie, thanks to Obama and the Smith-Moon Act that was repealed. So that's one. And number 2 is if they can't spin it, then they will bury it. They won't report on it. That's why you have all these other events that go on to clog the news cycle, or they just gaslight it, like they did with the presser the other day, you know, where then they cut away.
I think that part of this, and this is just a personal observation about this whole thing, is that this is a good this is a good way that we can just deal with 2 prevailing theories of medicine. And those 2 theories are germ theory and terrain theory. So if I wanted to make an analogy for those 2, let's say you have a fishbowl, and this fishbowl is dirty, and obviously you would want to clean it. Well, if you had germ theory, what they would do is you would take the fish out, and you would put it in a plastic bag, and then you would drop that plastic bag into the fishbowl. Kind of like if you had, say, they told you, oh, I need to take this medicine and that medicine, and we'll see what works. That's kind of how germ theory works. There are all these germs, and we got to make sure that all these germs are gone, even though our internal biome requires germs in it because there are such things as good germs, and they actually provide the flora and fauna within the body to be healthy. Terrain theory, on the other hand, would say, hey, don't throw the fish into a plastic bag. Just clean the tank. Clean the tank, and then everything should be just fine. And that's why if you see people who normally are a lot more, like a lot of us when we were kids, what they did, they allowed us to go out onto the mud and get dirty and just get covered in
swim in raw
filth.
sewage.
Oh, I don't think raw sewage, but
Yeah.
but they oh, okay, but they allowed us to get dirty and disgusting. Right. We took a shower afterwards or a bath afterwards, but what that did is that exposed our bodies to foreign pathogens and bacteria and stuff like that. It allowed the immune system to do its job. It gave us all of those memory cells that we needed for the helper T, so that they identified all these different things. And look at that. That's the thing we saw in the raw sewage that Sue was just talking about.
I used to play in the creek. I used to play in the creek and catch tadpoles. That was a fun thing to do.
Well, guess what? Guess what? That raw sewage that had a coronavirus. Guess what? Our helper T cells have the database now with those memory cells. And guess what? That particular one we know how to deal with now because we were exposed to it. And that's how the immune system works. You get exposed to it, your body identifies it, and then when it comes again, well, look at that. I don't get sick by the same thing twice because I have gained an immunity to it through the natural immune system.
Yeah.
So,
and
that's why research is very important to learn these things. And if you see, Dr. Bloom, you and I have discussed in the past about people using amps amount of germy kill.
Right. I was just thinking that.
Yeah. Yeah, you and I can be on the same wavelength sometime. But the amount of germy kill that's being used, what were you saying about that? If you keep using it over and over and over again, they're putting it out everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And they do it in hospitals too, you know,
The
but
bottles of it, they're shoving them in your face, basically.
when you're seeing all of this antibacterial hand, it's not really a lotion, but just like
Sanitizer, junk.
sanitizer.
Like a
Yes,
gel?
Yeah. Yeah.
That what it's actually doing is it's robbing you of what Alex was saying about those different bacteria, because we have good bacteria just like we have bad bacteria. You know, this is why you take like a prebiotic, for example, or even a probiotic, that you're having bacteria go into your gut in order to further like bolster your immune system. And so when you're taking all of these hand sanitizers, that what it's doing is it's actually stripping you of all of this bacteria, which eventually makes you more susceptible
To getting sick.
different things. And it's the same thing like with masks, that we are breathing in our own air, and we weren't meant to do that as a human being.
Well, you don't
So
cover the
we-
exhaust of a car, so why would you cover
Right.
your own
I was
exhaust?
just about to say that we're
Yeah.
breathing in the exhaust.
Yeah.
I know.
So I would argue that
So-
you're going to see more illnesses come this winter,
Yeah.
but it's going to be different. They're going to be respiratory, but it's
Mhm.
related to the fact that we're wearing these face diapers.
That's why they're pushing it, and they're
Yep.
pushing more of the hand sanitizers. They're doing everything to weaken us, not strengthen us. And I don't want to hear anybody that stands there and have a germy and probiotic problem if you're eating yogurt. You know, it's there. And
Well, you know, and
kombucha, and oh wait,
Right.
what about wine and beer?
Well, the
I
reason
wanna-
with yogurt
yeah.
is that the cultures of the bacteria that are in yogurt are heated, and so
Yeah.
it kills the benefit that comes from this.
Some of
So-
the companies don't do that, but it just
A lot of
depends,
it
right?
is- yeah, you just got to be really careful, because a lot of this is just bad marketing.
Yeah.
One thing I also wanted to mention when it came to like Germex and other, like say, sanitizers and stuff like that, is notice that it says, you know, kills 99.999% of bacteria or viruses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of what happened after we dealt with the swine flu.
Yeah.
After the swine flu, there was a massive outbreak, and I believe it was of MRSA. And MRSA is an antibacterial resistant pathogen. I forgot if it's a bacteria or a virus. But what happened is that it broke out, and I believe it was Brooklyn. And the hospitals in the area actually removed all hand sanitizer and under cleansers within it, because what they realized that when people were starting to expose themselves to sanitizer and Lysol and Clorox and all those other cleaners, they were getting susceptible to MRSA due to them robbing all of the good bacteria in it. And so what they actually had to do with MRSA at that point was that they just had to starve it to death. So
Yeah.
everybody just get dirty. Just be dirty, be exposed to it, and just breathe it in, and then we'll be able to kill the superbugs, because no one is going to be weakened by their immune system, because now they have all these things within their gut.
Yeah, that's why we don't use any antibacterial soaps in this house. You
John
know?
Bergman talks a lot about this, of the importance of kids kind of going outside, getting dirty,
Pick your nose.
Right,
Yeah.
right, exactly, yeah.
Eating their
Exactly.
boogers.
Really, it truly is. It's
You know,
disgusting.
your kids
But
eat their boogers.
Do you remember
I
those
tell-
doctors
I've
that
always told
came
my
out
kids,
this
wash your
spring?
hands. I don't want to see it.
Remember in
Well-
California this spring, there were 2 doctors that came out and were kind of whistleblowing on what's going on. Do you
Yes,
remember that?
yes.
So
Mhm.
and the video kept being taken down. So one of those, he was the CEO of a chain of hospitals. And I found on the back channel the actual presser, and I watched it all. And they talked about something very important, and this is what creates such fear in having the media, which is controlled by higher powers, having this message get out, which is that we are living too much in fear. And that it's the actual, any virologist that is worth his weight in his education will tell you that exposure to, like what we're saying here, to these different bacteria, etc., is actually a preventative because it builds your immune system. So for anyone who is nervous or scared about COVID, the most important thing is to limit your media consumption.
That's the first prescription.
That's prescription number one. And the other thing is to make sure that you're keeping your immune system high. You know, I mean, people, and because part of the fear is that they don't have control. As Trump says, it's an invisible enemy, right? Which is obviously code for something else. But it's like you can take the control back by keeping your immune system high. You know? So focus your research and your energy and efforts on that.
Well, and a lot of the research too, in order to strengthen your immune system, we need to produce glutathione. It's one of our strongest immune system boosters that we have. And N-acetylcysteine is one of those things that you can take that actually does it. One of my naturopathic doctors, whenever I had the virus this past February, I have asthma that's really bad, and the masks actually make my hypoxia pretty bad. Sometimes at work I have fainted, and but I'm a caregiver. I'm forced to wear it, and it sucks. But anyway, when I was having the breathing problems afterwards because of the lung damage that I've had, I was using some oxygen with my machine. He's like, why don't you take your nebulizer? And I take about 4 ounces of distilled water and just a little capsule with the little powder I'll put in with N-acetylcysteine, stir it up, and then I sift it through a coffee filter to get any debris out. And I put that in my nebulizer. That is a direct connection to my lungs. I am producing glutathione directly in my lungs. It took less than a week and I was fine. And I was sick for a couple months.
Wow.
So if we just do our research a little and learn about how the immune system works, of course, Bergman talks a lot about gut health, getting your gut healthy so we can make serotonin. That's where that's created. The COX, I think, 2 inhibitor. There's proteoglycan that's also inhibited. If you're taking things like non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, Tylenol, ibuprofen, Aleve, aspirin, any of those things are going to either inhibit or stop the production of those things. So it's going to inhibit your immune system. It also inhibits the blood-brain barrier. So it's crazy. Like literally watch his videos on what the non-steroidals do. Now that's just a part of it. What about our food? We've got all of these chemicals and things in our food that's killing, like we talked about Monsanto, that we eat these foods with pesticides on it. Well, what is in our gut but plants, but bacteria, but little protozoa, little bugs and things that are keeping us healthy? Our bodies are made of bacteria. We are made of viruses. And if we're going to kill all of these little viruses off, we're going to get overgrowths like Candida, for instance. We get shots or oral, maybe we're having a steroid or we're having an antibiotic because, oh God, I got an earache, I need to have that. We've got to restore that gut function. If you have to have an antibiotic, I'm not a doctor, I'm not saying don't do it. Just really research what can you do to restore the flora so that you can be sleeping. You can take that sympathetic dominant state, which means fight or flight, like, oh, I'm stressed out all the time, which down regulates your thyroid, up regulates your adrenals, and it makes it hard to digest your food because when you're running from a lion, you're not digesting. So everything is going through your body. Maybe you're going to get IBS. I mean, I've studied this stuff extensively because I had stage 3 adrenal cancer from stress, from the shit that I've been through, the trauma that I've been through on some of the programs that I talk about on my other talks that I do with people, and everybody has stress. So doing things to strengthen your immune system isn't just about, watching like the meds that you're on or the food, your sleep. What are you doing to calm down, to get into a state of presence or right now? Or there's so many ways to talk about it. So many people say, get into that now moment or whatever, doing breathing exercises, counting your breathing, doing, some people like to do yoga, maybe want to do meditation. It's going to be everything coming together to help us to find more of a balanced, centered state so that we can start to allow our bodies to regenerate and heal ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, Big Pharma knows what they're doing. I mean, all of this was planned. All of this, they had meetings, they had get-togethers. There was a video that was taken down of one of the truthers, and he actually had photos of them getting together several years ago. They basically had if you will, a convention. A bunch of doctors got together, virologists got together, whatever, they all got together. They were even giving little beanie babies out that looked like the coronavirus. They
Oh, yeah.
basically had a coronavirus convention or some sort of virus convention, and they were all getting together to figure out how to do all of this to us. So I'm just saying that all this is planned. They know what they're doing with the food. They know what they're doing with the water. They know what we're doing with the air. None of this is all natural occurring. All of this is artificially implanted. Number one reason is to reduce our population, to get us sick, to need Big Pharma, to need the medicines, to shell out the money. This is how they do it. Making us miserable is actually their favorite game.
There's an agenda. And that's where the Great Reset comes in, because like Alex was saying, they're showing their cards because they are so emboldened. Excuse me. Thank you.
Oh, what was that?
Bless you.
Gesundheit.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Yeah, so this Great Reset, and I think his name's Charles Schwab.
Schwab, yep.
Yeah, he's one of the main proponents really pushing this agenda, and part of it is he came out the other day saying that he's now floating around the idea of encouraging airports to do brain scans if you are to travel. And of course, they're already saying like the vaccine needs to be, mandated in order to go places to do things that 9 years from now, so by basically 2030, that Agenda 21 got changed to Agenda 2030 in its name. And part of what it is pushing for is that we don't have private property anymore, that we rent everything that we own. And go look up Biden's plan, because trying to remember the phrasing, I think it's part of the Green New Deal, but there is some component of his economic plan, which if he comes into office, you will literally have state officials coming into your home and inventorying every single item in your home and then taxing you. So if you have 4 televisions, then you will be paying a monthly tax on each television set that you own. If you have a bicycle or whatever it is,
That's similar to how they have it in the UK, where you actually have to pay for your television. It's not like it's not like a subscription or anything. It's like you have to have a license to actually use your television.
Yeah, I've seen that before. I've seen actually some of my British friends actually complain about that. The fact that because we get our TV pretty much for free, or we did have it for free, we were able to stick some rabbit ears on there and we could watch whatever we wanted. Now, in order for us to get anything decent to watch, we have to actually pay for cable now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of it just. There's always something there. Somebody can wake up. What did you say, Dr. Bloom? We talked about one time how you can actually have your wrist scan. You don't need to have your forehead scanned for the temperature and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, I've heard about other people.
What about scanning your third eye? I think there was a thing about scanning your forehead. I think it was supposed to mess your third eye up or help close it or something like that, I believe. Please don't quote me. I don't remember all the details to that. I didn't know.
Yeah, I've heard 2 different theories kind of floating around. One is that, they scan it, they scan the middle of your forehead, so it goes right to your third eye. And so the 2 theories that I heard, one is that this is, the beam of the infrared that's going in is closing your third eye or negatively affecting it. And the other theory is that the machines that are being used are actually owned by the white hats. And so this is helping to speed up the opening, decalcification of the third eye. So I don't know.
Yeah.
All I know is I think it's
But you
oddly
can be scanned by your
doing
wrist. Yeah. But
right
you
by
can
your.
be scanned by your wrist, if you're
I've
worried
heard
about
that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard like nurses, for example. I have 2 nurse friends, and when they go to get scanned, they just tell them to scan their wrist, and everyone has said yes so far. It's my understanding.
Yeah.
So.
So one of the other things you were talking about when it came to the reset was there's this conversation I've been seeing, which is the Great Reset is Jacera, basically, and I have had to mention multiple times that they are two different things. And like everything, there's a dark side to one thing, which is the reset, and then there's a light side of things.
Yep.
And the one thing that is very different by both of them is Jacera is dealing with fraud. It is dealing with all the fraud that we've ever dealt with: financial fraud, political fraud, social fraud, anything that any and everything that a person has been wronged in their entire life. This is designed to rectify it to a certain degree. Whether it's the birth certificates, whether it's retraining judges to constitutional law, whether it's getting rid of income tax and other taxes, and the only tax is a non-necessity tax, versus the Great Reset, where the purpose of it is indentured servitude. It's meant to create a slave class. It is meant to basically, here's your money and be a good boy, because if you're a good boy, you'll have nothing to worry about. But if you're not, well, we'll possibly put you on a no-fly list, a no travel list, and you'll not get that money, because that is exactly what they do in mainland China.
Yeah.
That's exactly, and they want to do this internationally.
Yeah. Well, let's
In
take that
China.
a step further with communism. What they've done historically is the dissenters, they've gone around and they've murdered them.
Yeah.
And so what do you see right now in a lot of the democratic platforms is this idea of floating around a list of people who were the scary Trump supporters. And they, on one hand, on the surface, of course, they call for unity, tolerance, forgiveness. And then the very next breath, they talk about how we need to keep lists and tracks and records of all the people that are these, racist bigots, and how we need to have, there was a blue check Twitter account that I read today that was saying how there needs to be a push for re-education camps for the 70 million Americans. And he's like, well, what do we do for these people? Just like, what did we do for the post-World War II Nazis in terms of, you wouldn't use the word, of course, indoctrination, but to bring them back into the fold of what we righteously know to be the objective reality. And they're already calling for camps in Australia and Canada. This isn't conspiracy theory anymore. They're
That's
using
actually
terms. In Canada, Trudeau is calling it COVID camps. And you can already find the push for electronic guillotines that Canada is buying. But in Australia, they're calling them re-education camps. There was
Alex, can I make an interjection really quick?
Yeah.
I've actually witnessed one of these camps in southwest Missouri, in Camp Crowder, and I actually got a death threat about it.
Really?
I had taken some pictures, and I don't even know where they are. I've moved twice since then. But what I had done is I had still had my military ID and went in because I saw that there was a sign that said gas chamber. And I'm just like, what the actual fuck is that doing out in Missouri of all places? Camp Crowder, just kind of a little history. It's just really, really rural. It's an old World War II camp. I mean, you'd think that there's nothing there. You've got the old barracks that have been pretty much taken out. It's the old city blocks that there's nothing there. It's old trees growing up. So perfect place to have a FEMA or, something like that, some sort of a camp. Well, there are fences that they're probably the 10-foot or whatever with the razor wire that faces in, not out. but in.
Yeah.
And then there were rail cars that had what you're talking about, the guillotine in it.
Yeah.
That there were like these shackled benches that were around the sides of these cars that could pull down and you could shackle in. And then there were coffins that there's some other people that have shown those online, that were just big plastic black containers, probably 8 feet, maybe 10 feet long, 4 by 4 by, I mean, they're huge.
Yeah, big
You
enough
could
to put a few people in there.
several bodies, yes. And the gas chamber beside it, the train tracks that went into it. I took those pictures. I started talking about not just Agenda 21, but Codex Alimentarius, because it's different things that I've just known about since I was a kid. My dad had shared things with us when we were kids. He got out of the Army as a lieutenant colonel, then a surgeon. And he's got friends, you know, and we talk whenever we were kids, especially. He's like, you need to know about these conspiracies that are going on. Here's the research. And, you know, he encouraged us to do our research. But, you know, these camps are real, and it's not just, you know, a lot of people think maybe that, no, it's not going to happen to the United States. They're not going to come here. But we do have a lot of these camps here.
They're already here, yeah.
Yes, they are here.
Walmart.
And even several years ago when I would be working in Salt Lake, because I used to travel all the time for my work, I would work in Salt Lake, in Las Vegas, Los Angeles, and drive at night quite often because of the long drives I would have between commuting. And I would see rail cars with long loads, and there would be tanks on the back of them. There would be military, the big heavy military vehicles. What the hell? You know, what the hell? So anyway, that's my 2 cents for that.
If I could add one thing to this also, is that this is very much what Bill Ayers and the Weather Underground group wanted to do back in the 60s and 70s.
That's right.
And they actually were part of a group. They actually were offshoot of a group known as the Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS. And I forgot the name of the whistleblower who was actually part. I think it was a whistleblower. He was a man who went undercover to be part of Weather Underground. But he was interviewed, I think he was interviewed in the 80s. And they were talking about what they needed to do to people to be used to the idea of communistic and fascistic tactics. And they said, well, there are going to be 3 classes of people that are going to be part of this. One group, and this is actually very similar to, Mario, this is going to be very similar to the stickers on the mailbox thing you were talking about a while ago.
Yes, those stickers are huge. And the thing is there's been 2 different timelines, because I remember when it was red, yellow, and blue, and now there's just red and blue.
Yeah. Well, so the way Ayers described it to him was that there's going to be one group of people which are going to be perfectly be able to assimilate within this particular society that Weather Underground wants to create. There's going to be another group that is going to be needing to get re-educated because they don't understand how the society has to work, and we have to ease them into it. So we're going to train their thoughts into it. And there's going to be this third group that is going to be untrainable and not being able to be not adaptable with this at all. And they're going to have to be gotten rid of. And he was very clear about this. By getting rid of, I mean kill. We're actually going to have to kill people because they're not going to be able to fit this. And this leads into the modern day FEMA camps that we're seeing all over the place. And that was actually really brought into prominence under the administrations of Bush and Obama. I mean, you saw FEMA camps everywhere, and a lot of the worn and empty Walmarts, especially when you go into the garden sections of the Walmarts where there are the open air area, those are going to be used as containment areas where then you went into the actual Walmart facility. And I'm not saying this is actually Walmart, the company. I'm saying these are buildings that were used by Walmart and then they were vacated. So they just have all the decorations that that company would use. Their connection to this is unrelated to this moment, and to my knowledge, I do not know their relation to it. Just a little disclaimer there. But,
well, and to interject another thing, anybody that's doing research Gene the Insider is a Navy intelligence officer that's doing a lot of whistleblowing. And there's some different shows. I'll look up some of his stuff and I'll post it below so people can also do that research
I
as well.
just
And he
got into
talks about
Gene
the stuff
recently,
that
and he's
Alex and
on
I
it.
are talking. What's that, Alex Bloom?
I just got into Gene and some of his videos this past week, and boy, he is really on it. Him and Wano Saban.
Yes, he's amazing. He's the one that I've talked with about finding my SSP records. And he thinks that just the history that I've given him on my own background, he's like, oh God, you know, I think we've got something. So he
Cool.
definitely, this guy has got information that I've known since I was a teenager that's finally coming out,
Wow.
you know, in a bigger bulk with actual people that are in the military that are whistleblowing this stuff.
Yeah, and last thing I wanted to bring up when it came to that is that I was watching this video, and I think it was in 2009. I believe it was 2009, might have been 2011, but you had this one guy who was just, you know, walking out. He had his phone or camcorder, and he was just, you know, he was just videotaping the location. Well, this particular Walmart was connected to a local rail line. And when he actually walked up to the side of the building, he was actually chased away by federal agents. Apparently they were saying that this is currently under investigation and that they need everybody to be out of the area, even though that particular Walmart was in public area. It was actually, there was no signs anywhere saying that this was federal property or anything of that nature.
Wow.
Yeah, so a lot of times there's going to just be a lot of hidden agendas even throughout your own city. There's unmarked buildings and there's always activities going on and things like that. A lot of stuff is happening under our noses, and a lot of stuff is happening out in the open.
I mean, I think
a lot of go ahead.
Oh, one last thought. If you really are curious about what they really want to do and the deep state in the cabal's end goal, I really recommend you guys looking into a particular genre, which is cyberpunk. Looking into what cyberpunk is, because cyberpunk, it would be like Minority Report or Blade Runner or stuff like that. And you're going to see this massive dystopian environment with mega corporations and transhumanism, and people are at that point are nothing more than chattel. People, we are currently chattel with the way things are, but we're talking about it being overly apparent chattel. You do not have a purpose other than to control, be a part of be a unit of the system. That is it. So look into cyberpunk, because I think I just enjoy just for the morbid curiosity of it, but maybe you'll get something out of it. Also, a game called Deus Ex is a huge red pill if you're ever curious and you're into video gaming.
And all of this is circled around, believe it or not, the children. When Trump came into office, he did sign a bill to save the children, to protect the children, to stop the trafficking rings and everything. And everything was even surrounded by that. And one of the things they're freaking out, the bad guys, the deep state are freaking out about is that we're taking the things away that the satanic, that's part of their satanic ritual, the children or the younglings of any kind. And, you know, they use them for all kinds of nefarious purposes. And so when Trump built the wall, that was taking a lot of that away. And, you know, a lot of the rings are going down, trafficking rings are going down and things like that. But all of it is connected. Everything is connected.
Mm-hmm. Totally, completely, utterly. Are there any other affirmative words I can use? I don't know.
So what are we looking forward for this particular week? We seen some more, I guess they're still working on the voter fraud case, so that's just going to take a little while longer.
So Sidney Powell came out, and there's an Epoch Times article either today or yesterday that said she will have everything ready to go within 2 weeks. So that's going to be one of the time.
I probably, I actually have the article. I would have to pull this. Let me see if I can just pull my background out just for a minute here, just to show it here.
Yeah.
Here's one of the articles about it.
Ah, cool.
You know,
it's a great newspaper.
Yeah,
I have
it's the Epoch Times newspaper. So, you know, I haven't had a chance to read it thoroughly all the way through, but, you know, they are talking about, you know, the fraud and stuff that's going on, and it's just it's going to just simply be an ongoing investigation.
Yep.
It's just,
Which, now that you mentioned 2 weeks, we have roughly 2 weeks until everything has to be certified. Everything has to be certified, I believe, on the 8th, if I remember correctly. 7th or the 8th of December.
14th.
14th? That's April. I thought that's when they vote. I wasn't sure if that's the same date as when they have to certify.
So all the states have to have, I don't know what date it has to be certified, but the actual voting takes place on the 14th in the Constitution. And then I believe it's January 4th is when the deadline is to officially name the next president.
Yeah. And then
The inauguration's on the 20th of January.
So we're getting close to we're dealing with a very tight deadline at this moment. You know, we have less than 2 full weeks to get everything set up, done, lawsuits being done, judged, and have the electors, because there is a good chance that, let's say a state refuses to certify, that state potentially could be disqualified and electoral votes will be removed. And that is actually most notably done during the Civil War period, because what happened was that the southern states, they didn't agree with, I believe it was Abraham Lincoln, getting the Republican nomination for the president, to become president. And they didn't send their electoral votes over, and so they were disqualified. And so Lincoln won the northern states, and thus he won the presidency.
Interesting.
I believe that's how that story goes, if I remember correctly. I do know that it was around the time of Lincoln. So don't quote me.
Well, General Flynn's son, Joe, he came out on Parler and was saying that Sidney Powell and all the legal teams are pulling 20-hour days to get this done in time. So I think we all need to send our intentions and prayers of protection.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Even, you know, because they changed how they're doing Thanksgiving and Christmas, you know, it's just, we hope this could end up even being a Christmas present, you know. We're hoping, we're praying.
And I'm still excited and anxious to see kind of all the other plot twists and turns that are going to happen. Like what we found out, what was it, yesterday or the day before, about how the Supreme Court justices can now trump the states in terms of the court rulings.
Yes.
And that was a card that I did not foresee being played. And so that's what's so exciting. And, you know, there's plenty more aces up Trump's sleeve. So,
I think,
and here's the other thing. We haven't really heard a peep about hammer being used. So, you know, that might be another Trump card that's played at some point.
I think when you're talking about the Supreme Court, I think that had to do with original jurisdiction, if I remember correctly. And the reason why the Supreme Court could take this without having to really go through any other of the hoops is because since we're dealing with 2 states, more than 2 states, then it's no longer a state case, where usually what would happen is that you would have to go through, like, let's say, Bush v. Gore. You would have to go through it was only in Broward County, so they would have to go to the local court over there to deal with it there. And then they would have to appeal it, and then they would have to appeal it again, and then they would have to appeal it a third time if it didn't go through the Florida Supreme Court, and then it went to the federal Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court. Where in this case, we're dealing with Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan. I think I said Wisconsin twice. Georgia. And so we're no longer dealing with one particular state. We're dealing with multiple states, in which then you're dealing with a federal case. And in that case, the Supreme Court can take that case all right away.
Wow.
Yeah.
So lots of exciting things. And I think the important thing, you know, when we talk about like, what do we do about all of this? You know, this is where like the blending of like spirituality and psychology comes in, of like to stay in peace, to not get overly worried or lose your cool, lower your vibration. That when we can come from this point of view of knowing that we know the end result, that then as a result of that, it's like we know how the movie ends. And so we're just watching the plot unfold in front of us. And that's how we stay in like a higher level of consciousness or vibration of this 5D realm, because then we don't get as bogged down. So really limiting, you know, mainstream media consumption is such a key role here. I mean, I was just passing by and saw the cover to, I think it was Wall Street Journal the other day, and it had a big picture of Biden, and he was in like, there's this like, how do I say it? Like an office, I suppose. And he had his podium. There was a huge projection behind him saying "Office of the President-elect," and it's just such, you know,
Theater.
Hollywood productions. Yeah, exactly, theater that's being played right now, that it's laughable. I mean, the sad part is a lot of people don't realize that Al Gore was president-elect for 37 days. You know, and we're in what, day 16, something like that, 17. You know.
Get your popcorn, folks.
Yeah.
And may I also mention that there is no such thing in the federal government known as the office of the president-elect.
Exactly.
Yeah, out of smart aleck, I've actually asked Suri where the office of president-elect was, just to be a smart ass to see.
And what did Siri say?
Siri said, gave me all kinds of addresses that was along Pennsylvania Avenue, but nothing of specific.
Have you asked Siri how old the president is?
Yeah.
I did that. I
It actually
did
switched. I did that too, and it's been corrected.
Oh,
I did that.
So
at,
so at first it did talk about Kamala Harris, which was weird.
Yeah, at like 5 o'clock East, around 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, PM. It said Kamala Harris, and I'm like, that's weird. Let's just use the deep state logic right now. You would have said Joseph Biden. You wouldn't have said Kamala Harris. And then I'm like, oh, 25th Amendment. That's what they want to do. They weren't going to use it on Trump. They were going to use it on Joe Biden. Yeah. Because, you know, let's say Biden gets into the White House, right? That's hypothetically speaking. I'm not saying he will, but I'm saying hypothetically speaking. What was going to happen? Well, he's going to do that. He's going to be that mentally challenged individual who's dealing with the decay. Kamala Harris can go to Congress and say, the president is mentally incapable of running this office. And then Congress
even though he was electable.
Yeah.
And then they'll be like, okay, give us your reasons. Oh, he is mentally incompetent. Well, then Congress can say, okay, invoke the 25th Amendment. He's out of office. Kamala Harris goes there. And then she's president. And then you have another vice president who would take this place.
Hillary.
But here's the funny thing. If Congress was actually smart, which, you know, in this worst case scenario, they would not consider her qualifications. Because, I mean, we can go into her qualifications at this moment, which...
well, Kamala wasn't even born here, is what I heard.
She was born in Alameda County, California, but she was not born she was not a natural-born citizen. She would be classified as a 14th Amendment citizen, which is a citizen of alien parents. Her father was a British servant, he was a British Bahamian, a British servant, I think they're called. Subservient to the crown. basically. Her mother was Indian, which that's a no-no right there. It just completely, it means that you have an alien father, an alien mother, and you have a child who, at that point, and I know this may be considered a crass term, but she'd be classified as an anchor baby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And usually when this is done, and this is the reason why we had the wall in the first, that's why Trump and the Patriots created the wall, is because what happens is that you'll have a child born in the United States, and the parents are alien. That child will now get citizenship through birthright by the 14th Amendment. What will happen then is that child will come of age, become 18, and then they can sponsor their parents into the immigration system. And then they can get them through that way. Versus the actual way of going through this, which is where you have to go through the port of entry, or you have to go through the immigration systems through, hey, I wish to become a citizen of the United States. And they'll be like, okay, I need you to do X, Y, and Z to do this. And then you have to you have to do the visa process through green cards and other immigration procedures. And then after a certain amount of time, then you can go and become a citizen. It's not an instantaneous thing. This thing can take a while. You can be on that immigration path for 10 plus years if things don't go right. And
I have a friend from Japan that's still going through the process.
And that's not to say that one part you will be denied, because then if you were denied, then you have to go through the process from page one all over again. And that's the biggest, that's what the big issue when it comes to, say, DACA and the DREAM Act is that's a whole different story altogether. But that's just kind of what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, the whole adoption thing, if you adopt a foreign baby and, get naturalized by American parents, which is what happened to me. So I came here at nearly 2 years old. So I was adopted by American parents and naturalized into the United States to be a U.S. citizen.
Sue for 2024.
The meme goddess. Woohoo!
Yeah.
But
and they had the rule that you have to be born here in the United States to actually even have a chance to become a president.
Hell, if Obama can do it, you can do it.
I'm not willing to fudge my records. I'm sorry.
I know, because you're amazing.
All right. Well, I can go into more detail later, but I don't want to bog you down with that, because if I do that, we're going to go into a ton of minutia.
Well, this has been fun, kids.
Yeah.
Kids.
Yeah, this has been really informative. I think it has gone for quite a while. And so I think let's just pick it up for another episode another time. And for C4OC Radio Network, as well as Revelation Las Vegas Network, any of you guys that have any questions, you can contact any of us on the links below. Feel free to make any comments there as well. And it's been awesome again with our lovely friends here, Alex too and Sue. It's been fun with Heart Mind Expressions. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for listening. Love y'all.
Have a good one.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.